Welcome and thank you for joining us for this lesson in Texas Air Mission's Missionary, Airframe, and Powerplant School online training video series. Learn more about our mission at flymaps.org. Subscribe to our channel now to get all of our future training videos.
Airport patterns, and we're only doing 3.4 today, so I wasn't going to combine it with any other ones for a couple reasons. One, it's kind of a longer lesson, and two, it's really important. So it's one of the ones you're going to want to memorize this information. So a lot of this information, not all of it, but a lot of it. So I didn't want to dump too much information on you at one time. And then we're also going to work on the added Mark 4 after the ground school lesson tonight. So, you guys ready? All right, so the first thing we're going to do, everybody's got your hand out there. The first thing is an illustration of an airport pattern. So how many of you guys have heard the term pattern, like an airport pattern, like flying the pattern, or he was on base to final, or you heard those terms, but you didn't have a clue what they meant, right? Well, tonight you're going to learn what they mean. You're going to know what they mean after this lesson. So we're going to go through these portions. When we say a pattern, what we basically mean is this rectangle pattern flying around the airport. And each of these components of this pattern have a name. And it's important that you understand them and you know the terms. Why? Why do you think you need to know these terms? You tell people where you are. Yeah, you're going to have a hard time telling somebody where you're at. Or they might tell you where they're at and you ain't going to know where they're at if you don't know what these terms mean, right? So it's important to communicate, because the whole purpose of learning this is because there are other people flying airplanes in the same place that you're flying an airplane, right? So if there were no other people flying airplanes up there, you could pretty much just do whatever you want to do, right? But there are. So we need to be able to do that safely. So let's go through these one at a time and label them. And we're going to start with what's called the departure. And it is just what the name implies. So in this situation here, the airplane's taking off on runway what?
Is it 35?
35 or 36?
It's 36. Which faces which direction?
That's north.
All right, so he's taking off. Yep. And when he lifts off, he starts what's called the departure portion of the pattern. He gets up to the top of the pattern, and there's three little different courses he can take there. Those first two that are kind of going off into the Neverland there are leaving the pattern. So, but we're going to assume he's going to stay in the pattern, and we're going to name the rest of the parts of the pattern. So he's going to make a left turn onto the part of the pattern called the crosswind. Why do you think it's called the crosswind?
Because it's across the wind.
Yeah, because there's the wind and it's across the wind. So it's the crosswind. He's taking off into the wind and then turning across the wind. So it's a crosswind. Then he's going to turn left, or she, making a left-hand turn onto the downwind. So this leg of the pattern is called the downwind. Notice that I skipped one, and we're going to come back to that one. But right now we're just dealing with the rectangular portion of the pattern. All right, so the downwind, why do you think it's called downwind? You seen a pattern here? You seen a pattern with a pattern? It's all relative to the wind, right? All right, so flying on the downwind and turning left on what's called the base. Notice too that that's where the altitude starts decreasing. So the base is setting him up to make a left turn onto, who knows it?
Landing.
Not landing.
Approach.
Which kind of approach? Final. Yep, so this is the final. He's making a turn from base on the final. And then landing. So those are the four sides of the airport pattern that you need to know. You need to memorize those. All right, let's go back to the one we skipped now. That is called an entry. We're going to talk about this in a little more detail, and I'm going to show you some regulations and talk about the aeronautical information manual info and stuff like that. But that is the pattern entry. So what do you think is happening there? What kind of an entry? Turning parallel with the runway? That's exactly right. So somebody coming in from that area is making a turn to enter which leg of the pattern? The down one leg, yep. All right, yes, sir.
So, with the crosswind and downwind being relative to the wind, what happens if the wind is perpendicular to the runway?
So we're gonna, the names are based on which runway we're actually orienting the pattern to, even if the wind has changed a little bit.
Okay.
But your question points to something we're also going to talk about today, meaning which runway are we going to use to base our pattern off of. So a little bit ahead of me, but you'll get it. All right, so which is the correct pattern departure procedure to use at a non-towered airport? A, depart in any direction consistent with safety after crossing the airport boundary. Make all turns to the left. Or C, comply with any FAA traffic pattern established for the airport.
I don't know why, but I think it's B for some reason.
You think it's make all left turns?
I think that is in compliance with FAA traffic patterns.
Yeah. That's why that's in there, to throw you off. Yeah.
I'd say
So I'm right?
Say A, depart in any direction consistent with safety.
too long to be wrong.
Too long to be wrong. Comply with any FAA traffic pattern established for the airport. C, anybody pick that one?
I'd say with
A couple people pick that one. All right, well, let's see. Let's answer this question by looking at some regulations. So 91.126, operating on or in the vicinity of an airport in Class G airspace. I'm not going to read all that. I'm just going to read what I got in a rectangle here. It says, and by the way, your classes of airspace, I'm not going to get into the weeds with you with that. We're going to learn that stuff later on. Right now, just bear with me, and I'm going to read the sections that are highlighted here. Each pilot of a powered fixed-wing aircraft must make all turns to the left unless the airport displays approved light signals or visual markings indicating that turns should be made to the right, in which case the pilot must make all turns to the right and more stuff we don't care about. So that rules out C. Can't be all turns to the left because some airports are going to have procedures for you to turn to the right, right?
Okay.
The next one is in 91.127, departures. Each pilot of an aircraft must comply with any traffic patterns established for that airport.
So it is C.
Yeah, each pilot of an aircraft must comply with any traffic patterns established for that airport, and that is under departures. And I highlighted it here. So, which is the correct traffic pattern departure procedure? The correct answer is C. Comply with any FAA traffic pattern established for the airport. So, what does that mean for you before you take off from that airport?
You look up the traffic pattern?
You better know what the traffic pattern is, right? What if you're flying to an airport? What if we were going to take off from here, from Horseshoe Bend, we were going to fly down to Stephenville and go over to the Hard A barbecue joint for lunch? What do we need to do?
Look it up before flying.
Look it up before flying. That's
Just
right.
get
You
in
need
the
to
car
know.
because it's not that far.
It's part of what?
Just get in the car because it's not that far.
That rhymes.
So we need to know ahead of time what the pattern is going to be, right? So how do we do that?
And know
We're
the
gonna talk
pattern
about
for
that.
your backup airport.
Did you guys? So let's stop for a second and talk about those regulations. I told you guys this probably, I think it was back in the fall. So those of you who were here for that lesson and remember it, where would you find the most current, latest, greatest, up-to-datest regulation to know what that regulation
It
says?
started with an A, right? It was a website.
Yeah, you're right. There's a website.
Was it the FAA website?
It was close. It's ecfr.gov. Remember Electronic Code of Federal Regulations, ecfr.gov? That's where all the federal regulations are kept up to date. That is the only source we have online of the latest, greatest, up to datest. And that's where I got those today. I actually checked them and made sure they were the most current one, and guess what I found? They were not. So I had to update the slide and put the modern, current regulation in there. Pretty much meant the same thing, but it was worded a little bit differently. So, all right. Well, what have I done here?
Converted it.
Yeah, it's just a mirror image. So what would you call this? I don't have fill in the blanks for this.
An airport that
They're the
states
same. The
otherwise.
point is they're the same fill in the blank answers with the exception of this one as you already have. But what do you think? What kind of pattern is this?
Right-hand traffic pattern.
This is a right turn pattern. That's right. So if you're flying a right pattern, the names of the legs of the pattern are exactly the same. You're still going to have a departure. You're still going to have a crosswind, a downwind, a base, and a final. Okay? Some of the illustrations, when I was looking for illustrations to put in here, some of them called this the upwind. So the departure and the upwind, they were using that interchangeably. Is that accurate?
No.
Is not accurate. The upwind and the departure are not the same. They go the same direction. So an upwind is if you are not going to land, do a touch and go, a low level pass. If you're actually going to miss, let's say that you turn base to final and there's an airplane sitting on the runway. Then what are you going to do? Yeah, you're going to do missed, and you're going to fly on the upwind, which in that case, you're going to get off the runway center line. Why are you going to get off the runway center line?
In case they take off.
Because you can't see the guy, right? And he can't see you. So if you fly right over there and he takes off, you're going to have a mid-air collision, or could have a mid-air collision. So your upwind is actually not going to be lined up with the center line. So it's inaccurate to say that the departure and the upwind are the same. They're similar, but they're not the same. Yes, sir.
How far away from the runway do you have to be on the downwind?
That's a good question, and it varies based on your airplane's performance, and it's up to you to decide that. So
I was just wondering if you were off center on the runway,
let me give you
would you be going headfirst into other planes on the downwind?
Well, if everybody's flying the correct pattern, then that's not going to happen. The upwind is going to be on
the left
side. You're not going to fly on the right side. You're going to fly on the left side, and you're not going to fly way out over here. You're going to be just off to the runway.
Okay.
But how far out your downwind is away from the runway is going to depend on your aircraft performance. And my answer as an accident investigator is your downwind should be far enough away that you can land with a power failure. So you shouldn't be so far out there that if something happens, you can't land the airplane. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but a lot of people do that for some reason. So, okay, good questions. All right. So there's a question inside this highlight that none of you have asked yet, but I figured you probably would. So I threw some extra slides in there to cover it. Let me read it again. Each pilot of a powered fixed-wing aircraft must make all turns to the left unless the airport displays approved light signals or visual markings indicating that turns should be made to the right, in which case the pilot must make all turns to the right. What's the question?
Where's not power?
Well, with this, what's within those words?
What are the signals?
What are the signals? What does that look like? What do those lights look like? What do the visual markings look like? So I want to throw some in there for you. So first of all, someone said checking charts for your pre-flight plan. Mm-hmm. So notice here that Pittsfield Airport, PSF, has RP 2632. What do you think RP 2632 stands for?
Right turn pattern.
Right pattern. And what is the 26 and the 32?
Degrees.
Degrees of the runway.
That's the runway names, yep. Runway 26 and runway 32. So this is saying that at Pittsfield, runways 26 and runway 32 have a right traffic pattern, right? This is Pittsfield Airport right here. Which runway is runway 26? And this little crude symbol of that airport, which one of those is runway 26?
Right.
Going this way?
No.
Kind of west, southwest, 260 degrees, right? West is 270 degrees, so it would be this runway right here, right? Right traffic patterns means stay up there, right? They don't want you making a left traffic pattern flying down here. Runway 32, which way is that pointed? Oh, remember 36 and 27, so it's going to be in between that, so it's going to be this runway that's running kind of northwest, right? And they want you to make right traffic, so you're going to be on that side. What are they doing?
Keeping everyone out of each other's airspace.
There's something down here they don't want you flying into, right? If you're flying a left pattern, you're flying around something down here they don't want you flying there. I'm pretty sure in that situation it's elevated terrain. I think the terrain goes up, so they want you to make right traffic so you don't collide with the terrain. But there's other reasons that might exist too. So, but we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Granbury's like that.
Granbury?
Right pattern 19.
Yep.
And left pattern 01.
And it's
so
because
you don't fly
of
over the school.
Because what?
So you don't fly over the school.
Yep. So this is one way you can find when you're doing your pre-flight. You look at the chart. You look at the airport you're going to on the chart, and if you see this, you know it's right pattern. What if it doesn't have any of that? It doesn't say LP or RP. Well, the standard pattern is left. It's not going to say LP, right? It's either going to say RP or nothing. So it's either going to be standard or non-standard. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, this is this is a visual you can see from the air, flying over this airport. This is what's called a segmented circle, because the circle is segmented. Yep. These are telling you pattern directions, right? So there's two valuable pieces of information in this segmented circle. One is a wind indicator, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And then you have your pattern indicators. So what do you think this one means? Yeah, if you're flying in that direction, you're going to make left traffic. If you're flying in that direction, which way are you going to go?
Right train.
You're going to make right traffic. That's what that's saying. That's a non-standard pattern if you're headed that direction. This is the illustration in your PHAC or your AIM or something that shows you what that is, and that's what the segmented circles are going to look like. And there's going to be pattern indicators for all the runways. So if there's 2 runways, you'll have actually 4 pattern indicators. Make sense? Everybody tracking? That's what that regulation meant. All right, so what is the recommended entry position to a non-towered airport traffic pattern? I highlighted recommended, because this is one of those things that if you get onto a forum with other pilots, it turns into a ridiculous squabbling debate. So it's a recommended entry position, but it's the only one given in this aeronautical information manual. And it shows you right here, number 1 is entry. None of these other ones are entries. So it's only giving you one recommended entry. And I have zero doubt that your CFI is going to teach you this entry as your standard entry. Because is it regulatory? Can you fly other entries? Yes, you can. There are other ways, and at times there are more suitable ways. But the standard entrance is going to be right here, number 1. Enter pattern in level flight, beam the midpoint of the runway at pattern altitude. What does a beam mean? Well, if this is the runway, midpoint right here, a beam would be perpendicular to it where it intersects the downwind, right? So that point right there would be a beam. So by the time you start your entry, you're making that right-hand turn onto the downwind. By the time you get to midfield, you should be wings level, established on the downwind. A lot of people enter here and then they're actually not established until they're down here. That's getting behind the airplane. You shouldn't do that. You should actually be wings level, established on the downwind at midfield. That's a standard pattern entry that's recommended by the FAA and the Aeronautical Information Manual. Right? So the answer to your question is, to enter in level flight, beam the midpoint of the runway on the downwind leg at traffic pattern altitude. And if you don't know what traffic pattern altitude is yet, you're going to learn it. Don't worry about it. And we're going to not get into those weeds today. But pattern altitude is typically standard, sometimes not. But you're going to fly at the same altitude as everybody else in the pattern for that airport. So level flight, beam the midpoint of the runway on the downwind, traffic pattern altitude. Those are the things you need to know. And your CFI is going to ask you that, so you need to know the answer to that question. You need to know all of those elements of that answer are important, so you need to know all those. Yep. Everybody got this? All right. Name the types of wind indicators shown above. So remember that segmented circle, one of the other elements that was important in that was a wind indicator. So airports are going to have these kind of a wind indicator. In fact, you guys have probably seen this one leaving our hangar because our runway uses a windsock. In fact, that's
right in front of the road.
Most airports use windsocks. That's probably the most common one. So the first one, there's your answer. It's a windsock, right? Windsock or a cone. I don't really hear very many people call it the cone, but windsock's usually what they call it. This one here is called a tetrahedron. Can you guys see that, or do I need to spell it out? Can you see those letters? Okay. Tetrahedron. It's on your way.
It's just the name of the shape. It's not
Yeah,
even a
that's
fancy
what
name.
it
It's
is.
just the name of the shape.
Right?
It's like saying the pyramid. Just the
Or the
geometrical name.
And then you got the wind T. This one can be a little bit deceptive. They usually have a bigger tail than that. So, but they do what's called weather vaning. You guys heard the term weather vaning? You know, if you see a barn with a little metal chicken with the 4 cardinal directions on there, which way is the rooster facing? It faces the way the wind blows, right? because the rooster tail catches the wind and it turns the rooster into the wind. That's the whole point of having a weather vane on top of the barn, is to see that the rooster's pointing you in the direction the wind's coming from. So these do the same thing. So the wind blows them and they point into the wind because of their shape, so because of physics. And then the other one, the windsock, the wind blows into the sock and points it in the direction
Away from the wind
is blowing. Yeah, right.
So away from where the wind's blowing?
Yes. It's pointing in the direction that the wind is going. Yeah. The other ones are what direction it's coming from. Yeah.
The windsock seems more intuitive than the other two.
Yeah.
It seems pretty obvious.
Yeah. Windsocks wear out pretty quick, especially here in Texas with the sun beating down on them and all that. So some of the windsocks even have you can tell how hard the wind is blowing by how much the thing is inflating. So
yeah, some of them are really long and they'll be limp halfway through, so you can see exactly how hard it's blowing.
Yeah, right. So I'm not going to throw all that at you because it's more information than you need tonight, but just know that some of them have that. So, all right. So windsock, tetrahedron, and wind tee. You guys got those three?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. According to figure 49, which is this one here, what will be the best runway to land on? This is showing a tetrahedron right here. The tetrahedron is pointing southwest.
I would say land on 22.
Who says runway 22?
Me.
So which way is our wind blowing here?
It's blowing northwest or northeast.
Blowing northeast. So landing into the wind. If it wasn't for another factor, runway 22 would be the best runway to land on.
Except it has an X on it.
Ah, it has an X on it.
I remember the last meeting.
Yeah, so last week we discovered that having an X on the runway means what?
It is closed.
Yeah, you cannot land on that runway. In fact, one of the airplanes in the hangar that is a parts donor for the other airplanes being restored is now a parts donor because the pilot landed it on a closed runway. So landing on closed runways is not a good idea. So
Did he just get
what is it?
What happened to the plane when he landed on a closed runway?
Why did he land on the road?
Or
I mean,
what happened to the plane that made it a parts donor?
He hit some construction debris or something that was on the runway. So yeah, he hit some. I don't know what it was, but fortunately, it was he survived the accident. In fact, when I looked up the N number, I found the accident report, and I knew the NTSB guy, and we were chatting a little bit about what happened. So it was a guy that I knew, a friend of mine.
Insider information.
Happened in Louisiana, yeah. So
Did you investigate it?
nope, it was not one of mine. So let's not land on runway 22 because we don't want our airplane to be a parts donor. So what's the next best runway we can land on?
15.
That northmost.
This one?
Yes.
I think it's actually 1-8. It's hard to see from there, but it's pointing due south, which is 180 degrees. So it'd be runway 18. Who thinks 18 is the best option?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Because
runway 18 is the best option. All right, so landing on 18, describe the crosswind, if any. Not the crosswind, the name of the pattern leg, but the actual crosswind, the direction the wind's blowing relative to where you're at the airplane.
It's 45 degree angle.
Coming at you at a 45 degree
It looks
angle
like it. From which
your
side?
right.
Yeah. So it is coming from the right. So you are landing on runway 18 with a right crosswind.
Wait,
That answers my question.
does the
I asked
flat
like
side
30
of the
minutes ago.
tetrahedron point towards where the wind's coming from?
No, the pointy side is telling you where it's coming from. So the wind is blowing that direction. So it turns, the flat side is actually why it turns that direction. So the slope side causes the thing to rotate.
That's why
And
a
the
windsock
point
is the best way to
points
go.
that direction. So the wind is blowing this direction. You want to land into the wind. So runway 18 with a right crosswind. So somebody, did you have a question about the?
What's the other one? Is the other one 3-4?
It's pointing north, so it's runway 3.
Oh, yeah.
6, right? 360 degrees.
I can't
Remember
see
too, it's always 18 different. So if this is 18,
Plus
subtract
one.
18.
0, 0.
What's that?
Well, if it's pointed straight up, wouldn't it be 0, 0?
There is no 0, 0. They're all numbered from 1 to 36 in whole numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then north 0 and 36 are the same. So they would number the runway 36. Yep, good question. Does someone have a question about the crosswind? What does it mean to land with a crosswind?
It means it's blowing across your plane.
Yeah, it's not blowing straight at you, right? So you're landing with the wind blowing you for a right. So you're gonna do that. You're gonna practice with crosswinds, but you're gonna have to control the airplane a little differently.
If you're landing at
Hang on one second, go ahead.
Would you engage the rudder to compensate?
Yeah, but I'm not gonna get into that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's gonna be some more things you're gonna do, but I don't want to throw too much at you. So
if you're landing on the 1-8 side of that runway, would it be a different crosswind than landing on the 3-6 side?
yeah, if you're landing on 3-6, you got a quarter and tailwind, so it's gonna be pushing you. You don't want to do that. Remember that your airspeed is relative to the wind blowing towards the front of the airplane. So when you're taking off and landing, you want that wind to work for you, not against you.
You want it to push you back a little bit?
Yeah. So if you're doing 60 knots with a 20 knot tailwind, what's your ground speed?
80 knots?
Yeah. So you're having to land at 80 knots. Yeah. So you don't want to do that. If you go the other way, you're landing at what?
40.
Right. So which would you rather land at? Make sense? Yeah. And then if you're landing with a 45 headwind, you're going to learn how to calculate and make all those factors, but it's going to affect your airplane. It's going to affect the way it flies. And your CFI is going to teach you how to make corrections in your airplane for that. All right, same figure. Runway 18 has a blank traffic pattern, and runway 36 has a blank traffic pattern. So runway 18, let's do that one first. What is the direction of traffic for runway 18?
Well,
Yeah, so look at your segmented circle.
yeah.
Which one of these represents runway 18? This one?
It's
It's
a
parallel
right
to it.
traffic pattern. It's
Yeah.
Left.
right pattern.
Is it this one or this one?
Both.
Both.
For runway 18.
For runway
Oh, for
18, it's
the
the
top
one
one.
on the bottom.
On the top.
Yeah, the short part of that indicator is the pattern indicator. The other part is the runway. So the bottom one applies to runway 18. So you're think of it as a compass thing too.
That's
so
the direction
south,
you're going.
180 degrees. That's south. You're flying that direction. That's your runway, and it is a
Right pattern.
right pattern. And runway 36 has a left pattern. What about runway 4 and 22? They have a closed pattern, right? We already established that. Can you fly those traffic patterns when a runway's closed for training? So you just want to go up there and practice patterns.
Yes, but you can't land.
You can. You cannot land. You're correct. You can. Is that a good idea?
No.
It's probably not a good idea. If the runway's closed, you probably should just stay out of there altogether, right? Unless it's like here, and you know everybody's using that runway, and it's not a big deal. But I still probably wouldn't do that because you have people making phone calls and all that.
What,
and
what
stuff
if you
like that.
take the upwind part of that closed traffic pattern instead of flying over
There's
the
nothing.
runway?
There's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing that says you can't do that. But you shouldn't do that. If the runway's closed, then you should just assume the pattern's closed too. It's just a good practice to not do that. So. All right. According to the segmented circle shown on Figure 50 above, the traffic pattern for the airport is left for runways blank and right for runways blank and blank. So here, you get to figure out the runway numbers without being given the runway numbers and the traffic pattern. So which ones have a left traffic pattern?
We've got 3-6,
3-6 and 9.
9,
Just 9.
or 09.
Niner.
3, 6, and 9. Everybody agree with 3, 6,
3-6,
and 9?
9. And
3, 6, 9 on the goose drink line?
yeah, 3,
Which
6,
one?
and 9.
Which one of these is 3, 6?
Down the bottom one. Bottom one's 3-6. The right one's 9.
So if you're flying 360 degrees north, this one?
That's going to be the top.
Oh wait, it is.
There you go. Remember, think of this like a compass too. So north, 3, 6, left traffic pattern. That's correct. Runway 3, 6 would have a left traffic pattern. Runway 9. Which one's runway 9?
The
right
the
one.
left.
The right one.
Right. This one? I hear left. I hear right.
It's counterclockwise, so left.
This one.
Yeah, but it is a
9. It's a compass. 1,
It should be
2,
the left one. Right?
3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, 7,
The right one.
8, 9?
The right one.
No.
90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, 360 degrees. Remember that from your compass? 360, 90, 180,
Okay,
270.
I remembered it backwards then.
Yep, so this is 90. Runway 9er is 9, right? 90 degrees. And it is a left pattern. So you're flying that way, you're going to turn left. This is a good time to learn your left from your right. If you have not done that already, right?
Well, when the left
an
is
important skill
actually
for pilot to
up,
have.
it's kind of difficult.
Well, when you're in the airplane flying that, it's going to be left, so you're going to turn left. All right, which one's ever right?
The other two.
1.8 and 2.7.
Yeah, which one's, so here 1.8 and 2.7, which one's 1.8?
The bottom one.
180 degrees, so you're flying in this direction, and that says turn right. So you're flying this direction, make a right turn, that pattern is going to go like that. 2.7, going west, same thing, right. Everybody agree with that? I didn't give you the answers on there, but that is correct. 9 and 3.6 and 1.827. All right, the airport, same figure, has been designed so that flights are avoided over an area to the blank of the airport. Which part of the airport are they wanting you to avoid?
The southeast.
Southeast. Yep, that would be this area right here. Notice all the patterns have you going away from something right here. Southeast, over an area to the southeast of the airport. What's over there?
Probably the tower. Probably building.
None of your business, right? It doesn't matter.
Anything from a military base to a government.
You might be able to figure it out looking at the chart. You might see a tower or an antenna or restricted airspace, but more often than not, you don't know. Just, it's none of your business. Stay out of it, right?
There's a reason you're not allowed there.
There's a reason. All right, what are some reasons the airport might have been designed this way? Noise abatement, restricted airspace, and obstacles or terrain. So Grand Prairie, for example, was mentioned. It probably falls under noise abatement and
Restricted.
Obstacles.
it's probably not restricted, but they don't want you low level over school for obvious reasons. So obstacles, terrain, yeah. What does it say?
What are the errors indicate on runway 18?
Oh, did we skip one?
Did you skip it, or did I just not see it?
Yeah, we skipped it. Let's go back to it.
Yeah.
Good. So there's one on your handout that I didn't put in here. That was looking at this illustration, and it says, what do the arrows on runway 18 and 36 mean?
It's something displacement. It has
You are
the
correct. The first word is displaced.
displacement.
There's a second word. What's the second word?
Taxi.
This was just a week ago, y'all. Come on now.
Yeah, I know. I remember the
Just
word.
a week
I
ago.
I
remember the
remembered
word
everything
displacement.
else.
And if you watch the YouTube video, I just put it up in the last 2 days, so you should have just seen it.
I remember the displaced word.
You almost said it. Displaced threshold, right? This is your threshold right here, so it's a displaced threshold. What does that mean?
The actual touching down spot.
Don't land there.
Can you touch down here?
No.
Can you taxi here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
threshold you can taxi behind it.
Taxi and takeoff. It is open for taxi and takeoff, but it is not a landing area. You cannot land there. That's correct. Right. If you could not taxi or take off, what would the markings be?
X's.
No, that'd be
No,
a
that's
close
Oh,
run.
no, it'd be
I
the-
think it's
It'd be the solid triangle.
2 lines.
Yeah, they're
and
called
then-
chevrons. Yep, the chevrons.
Yeah.
That's a
Yep,
triangle.
for the overrun area,
It's the
blast
thing.
area. Yep. So, and what's it for?
To tell you to wait.
That's for when you're having a bad day if you're in that overrun area. It means you overshot the runway, right? Okay, we're done. Any questions or comments?
No.
You guys are subject matter experts on traffic patterns around, right? You got all that information on your handout. So now you can memorize that and be ready to wow your flight instructors.
Thank you for watching this lesson from MAPS, the Missionary, Airframe, and Powerplant School, a ministry of Texas Air Missions. If you found this training helpful, please subscribe, like, and share to help support the mission. To learn more about our ministry, visit flymaps.org. We look forward to having you join us for the next lesson in this series.